much to our chagrin, we played that earlier for you, and we made a small mistake in bringing it back to you again. We try not to repeat music for you within the one programme. My friend and former colleague within the BBC, Adrian Horsman, is with me now. Good to see you. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Ron. Always lovely to be here.
Well, it's always good that you take the trouble to come and see us, because you're at the helm of the public outreach of Christian Aid,
yes,
an organisation for which we have the very highest regard.
Thank you.
You'll be glad to know that your chairman, Bishop Trevor Williams, was here sitting where you're sitting 3 weeks ago, and he sends his regards. He's in good form.
Very good, of course.
He's retiring
he's just about
now.
to retire, yes.
Yeah, you'll get more of him, I
Bishop
suppose,
of
as a
Limerick.
consequence.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah,
well, he's been very good for us, you know, chairing our boards,
Yeah.
and that's.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the churches and so on, of course, who we have to answer to.
Absolutely. But in the dissemination of kindness, goodness, and Christian love, you don't need those who are vulnerable to be part of any church. You give to everyone as necessary.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, that's the point. We work with everybody,
Yeah.
whatever their faith or no faith at all.
Oh, yeah, Oxfam's like that, Concern's like that, Troker is like that. So you guys, you Christian, see these Christians, the good that they do. You do good things. Well done.
I'm waiting for the barb here.
There's
I'm never
no
quite
barb.
certain with you.
Why would I? How dare I barb
with
at Jesus Christ? I would never do that. Oh, I'm too much of a realist. This guy might be real. He might zunk me or zap me, and that would be it. No barb whatsoever. A barb between thee and me, Mr. Horsman, is impossible, I tell you. It's so good to see you. Last week was your big week.
It was indeed Christian Aid Week. We have it the second week of May every year. Our big fundraising week.
Yep.
It's when people go around door to door collecting. I was pounding the streets of Banbridge myself, my hometown, just up the road here, and out on the road.
Is it too early to say how the week went, what you pulled in terms of money?
It is, babe, because it'll be a while now as various churches and organisers pull together the money, count it out, send it in.
Can you remember what it was last year, roughly? Sort of a generality. No, don't worry, because that's a matter of the accounts, which we don't have in front of us at the moment.
I deal with the media side of things.
I know that, and that's let the bean counting happen. It's very important that it happens.
It certainly is.
But then we talk. But I mean, what you can reflect on is the great conference on conflict.
Yes, it was. From that point of view now, it was an extraordinary week, because the theme this year that we had for Christian Aid Week was conflict, peace building. Because, as you know, in Christian Aid, we don't just put a sticking plaster on the problem of poverty. We want to get to the root of it. What's causing poverty? And so we've identified a number of things that have caused poverty. Education, you know, lack of education, for instance, being one of them, land theft, taxation, tax dodging, all that. Conflict, obviously. Conflict and poverty are tied together like that. Poverty often causes conflict. Conflict causes poverty.
Yeah, no escaping
So
it.
what we had some
Yeah.
really interesting people came over. We held this conference up in Belfast at the 174 Trust, and we had some of our partners and people came over from all over the world. We had somebody from each of the main continents where we work. We had Judith Maldonado, came from South America, from Colombia. She's a human rights lawyer. We had Hero Anwar. I love the name Hero.
Hero.
Yes, but actually you're quite right. It's pronounced Hero. But,
Hero.
it's spelled Hero.
Hero. It'd be very hard to be embracing such a person saying, "Hero, my darling." You couldn't do. So Hero was there.
She was there.
Yeah.
Yes, she's from Iraq, from northern Iraq. And then we also had Yakuba Kony, and he's from Mali in West Africa. And so each of them, you know, where there's conflict in their own countries, and obviously we had them here in, well, up the road there in Belfast, right next to one of the peace halls. And the idea, you know, who's lecturing who, who's telling who, look, we went through this. It's not a lecture, it's a sharing. This is what we've done, this is what we've experienced.
It seems to me you had all the good guys and girls there. But the bad guys who cause the conflict and who are responsible for the consequential poverty, who's talking to them?
What we're trying to do, there's different ways of doing this, you know, when you're trying to get people involved. I was in Congo last year, DRC, and there the problem is women being assaulted. We have all these militias roaming around in the forests. The conflict's officially over, this war, but women are being assaulted. They have to walk to their fields, they have to walk along the roads, they're vulnerable. They still have to do it because they have to grow food, they have to get to their fields.
And this is obviously a sexual assault.
So our partners there are working, well, besides giving help to the women and having listening posts in places where they can go and report it and try and get some justice, certainly get medical help, certainly counsel their husbands and tell their husbands that it wasn't their wives' fault what happened, that they're not to be rejected, try and tell at village level that women who've been assaulted, sexually assaulted, are not to be rejected. But then we also get speaking, this is to answer your question, we get speaking to the military and trying to get out to the militias as well. Wow. And working with the officers, getting them to teach their men that the villagers are people. They're not objects. And we'll do some practical things. It may seem almost, football matches, for example. Getting a football match between the men of the village and the soldiers. Getting the soldiers to help with bringing in the harvest. And when I say the harvest, of course, remembering that most farmers in Africa, as you know, are women. So it's the women farmers. Getting both sides to see each other as people. Now there would be one practical example.
But isn't it amazing that the military, who would be throughout history, who would have been the arch perpetrators of rape and pillage, that they're opening their doors to you and they're engaging with you in conversation about a better way forward?
Reluctantly.
It is reluctant, is it?
Well,
how do you make the approach to the military? How did you do it?
Well, it's our partners.
Yeah, how are they doing it?
Through local knowledge. I mean, the whole point about working with local partners, they're people who know their own area. They know their own people. It's not for us to go in and tell somebody what to do.
No.
But I mean, we facilitate, we help, we fund, we give advice when asked for. We work very closely with our partners. Our partners are our equals.
Where's the drive coming from, though? Is it the local people on the ground who are saying, let us engage with the military and try and find a solution to this? Or are you sitting down with them and as a consequence of meetings, you're coming up with this better way forward?
Initiatives like that would come from the ground. And it would be our partners who would... We're talking, when I say a partner, we're talking about a local organisation which has been formed, which has been started by local people. A few citizens who've got together and said, look, we've got to do something about this. Our partners come from different backgrounds. It might be a group of vets who get together and say, this area needs is animal health. People don't know how to look after their cattle, for example, or doctors, or church workers, or lawyers. The case from Colombia, Judith, who's over as a human rights lawyer, where the problem is actually essentially one of land theft, land grabbing, people being forced off their land by big companies, the people who farm palm oil and so on.
Oh, yes.
And so they're forcing the peasants off who can't prove that they own the land, or they have difficulty coming up with the bits of paper. And this is where our partner, in that case then, the lawyers are actually able to go through and say, well, actually, yes, we can prove it.
We can prove it.
Take it through courts. And, it's not necessarily, it's not the classic idea of development whereby people think, oh, you're in development, right? Digging wells, building schools, all of that is really important.
There, it's necessary,
but there's other stuff too.
But I mean, that's the enjoyment, that's the encouraging thing, that's the uplifting circumstance. That you are there with the sticking plasters, you're then there with the interim treatment for the affliction, you're building the wells and providing education. You're then looking beyond that straight development.
Trying to stop the cut happening in the first place.
Yeah, this is what you're doing when you're going. But it's vastly reassuring to know that you're doing that. People can take great comfort from that Christian Aid is dealing with the rough edge of the problem.
I never cease to be amazed those times when I've gone overseas and I've met our partners, and the problem sometimes there's a lot in common with the problems they face, but often there's commonalities, common themes. You'll see that. A common theme over and over again. I know we were talking about conflict this past week, but actually the one that really gets me is education.
Ah, yes.
Always. If we can get girls, specifically girls, actually.
Yeah, and this is why Boko Haram is having a field day in northeast Nigeria.
Well, that's what they're frightened of.
Yep.
They are frightened of women being educated, because then their power base is gone. They'll be shown up for what they are.
From your... I have some ideas, but they're shallow enough because I don't know. But Boko Haram, what's the way forward there from your voyages into Africa and the people you've met, the people you know? If you know that Boko Haram is in the bush, what do you do? How is it dealt with? How can you do anything about it?
You do need, there's more than one answer and none of them are simple. You do need the government to step up to the mark and provide security. You do need people to stick together and say, actually, we will carry on sending our girls to school. We've had to do this in Afghanistan. We've been in Afghanistan through many different regimes, from communist times, through the Taliban, through the warlords, partners there providing. Sometimes the education for girls is above ground and in the open. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes taking place in the front rooms of people's homes, in the quiet, because it was illegal, depending on the regime at the time. You've just got to keep going. What you cannot do is give up.
No.
You cannot say, that's it, I give in. Because then you're lost.
It's a horrendous concept to understand that Boko Haram in the Hausa means Western education is evil. That's a huge nailing down of a twisted belief, you know.
But something that's important to say, people see the headline, Boko Haram in Nigeria, or the Lord's Resistance Army over in Uganda, another sort of cult-like, very, very unpleasant militia. Excuse me. But actually, a lot of what we're doing, I talk about the development in general, is really working. Over the last 20, 30 years, we have seen the rate at which children are going to school shoot up. It's been rocketing up. Children going to primary school now, what is it, over 90% of the world's children are now going to primary school. 20 years ago, something more like 70%.
90% of the world's children in it. Yes.
And the next stage now is try and get that number through secondary school. I saw that in Burkina Faso. Seeing teenage girls going to school. Whereas when I was there in the 80s, it was only boys who would go to primary school.
10 years ago, when I went to a place in Africa, which because of what we were talking about, I no longer identify, but the children had never been in education in their lives. We now have 2 schools there. One, the primary school with 800 children, and the secondary school with 300 children and growing all the time. And parents, local partners are all involved, and there is progress occurring through education. So back to conflict, because you obviously knew what you were doing in selecting conflict as the topic for the conference, because therein lies the root to all evil. Education is, of course, the branch of resolution. But what's the message coming to you from those folk who came to you that you've mentioned as the way forward in the conflict?
Something I've kept seeing over and over again. Right. Well, they each presented different cases. Yakuba in Mali, he's our country manager from Mali. Now, Mali, huge desert country in the interior of West Africa. Most of it is Sahara Desert. It's only down in the south is there a bit of greenery. Otherwise, it's just wide open area.
And that's wet season as well as dry season, or do they get a wet season at all?
Yeah, there'll be a bit of rain down in the south occasionally. Much. Yeah, exactly. It's largely an enormous arid country. We've had Tuareg rebellions on and off there ever since independence in 1960, independence in France. The most recent Tuareg rebellion, a couple of years ago, 2012, the Tuaregs, who are nomadic people, were, and have kept feeling that central government has not paid attention to their grievances. That's generally been their grievance from what I can gather. But they were reinforced by sort of Al-Qaeda affiliated elements, freelancers who come from Libya. With the collapse of the Gaddafi regime, these people came out of Libya, and suddenly there was a new militancy to what they did, and they effectively took over a large part of the country, and then there was French military intervention.
And sometimes they can be bought in. People with an agenda can actually engage these people to come in and pay them to come in, mercenaries, that they're there causing the havoc.
But what Yakuba was saying there is to get to the cause of why is there conflict, and he says Mali's problem, the sort of hidden problem, is the youth of its population. Half of the population is under 15. Incredibly young. And you've got a lot of young men standing around street corners all day long in the capital city and the towns in the south with nothing to do. So these guys come along and say, look, you come up north, we'll give you a gun, you'll get a bit of status, we'll feed you. There you go. So actually what you've got to do is provide employment or activity or get the young men involved. And if you don't do that, you're not going to solve it.
I suppose if we look at the Anglican community, and Christian Aid is at the very heart and seat of the Anglican community. Justin Welby, your Archbishop, he spent time in Nigeria and trying to do things there before his appointment. Has he prioritised these issues as much as you felt he perhaps should have done?
I don't know enough about that. That would be our colleagues, Christian Aid over in Britain.
Yes, of course.
But because here, of course, we answer to and are owned by the main Irish churches, including, as you say, the Anglicans, Church of Ireland, also the Presbyterian Church and the Methodists, and a number of other churches as well. And it is...
I take your point, but the structure of Christian Aid is there. You're the leaves on the branches on the trees. You're there and all the time within the churches. How strong are you across the island of Ireland at the moment?
I think amazingly strong, and it's entirely because of our volunteers. It's the fact that there are so many people who are willing to go out and knock on doors, hold coffee mornings, go on sponsored walks.
Simple things, but important things.
That's what does it. Without our volunteers, and also the volunteers who come into our office, answer the telephones, put thank you letters into envelopes.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. And things like that things like that make a difference. That someone takes the trouble. You know what? If you're allowing people to feel a sense of familiarity with ownership of the project, then you're over a particularly difficult fence, because people sometimes feel, if I give money, I don't know where it's going. I know it's doing good, but I'd love to know more about it. But at that kind of volunteer level and people seeking out the small snippets of information, whether it be sponsorship or something else, you're actually cracking a particular difficulty here.
I think there is a sense of ownership.
Hugely important.
On the part of our supporters. And obviously there's church support, and also in the Republic of Ireland we've got government support.
Indeed.
Irish Aid.
Irish Aid has been very good.
Very important partner of ours.
They have their system of small grants is very, very useful. It's been stabilised at about 15,000 over the last number of years. We have benefited from it in my part of Africa. So and it all very, very funny how you know things develop and continue to develop, and even personal knowledge of the situation. With the ambassador to the West African nations, perhaps having a conversation with him, it leads to another thing, and suddenly there's an extrapolation occurs. And
it's the Irish way, isn't it?
The Irish
networking.
Way. Networking, it is. Our present, I think he's still there. He's a Cavan man, and he's still there in West Africa. Congo, it was a tough assignment for you going there. What was the worst you saw there, the thing you saw there that caused you most despair?
There's some things you actually wouldn't want to talk about on air. It was distressing. I brought with me two journalists, one from the Sunday World, Yvonne Murray, who she's now with the Irish Sun, but at the time she was Sunday World, and also Shona Murray, who works for News Talk Radio. And so we went out there and we were interviewing women who've been raped multiple times, often, and their stories told with dignity. I'm almost scared describing it. It's certainly that their stories were told in such simple.
I like the way you said it, with dignity. And that's
dignity is a key word.
Yeah, a key word, because you're trying to articulate an awfulness, and the word that comes to your lips is dignity on the person who has been the victim.
Survivor.
It's a wonderful thing. A survivor, the person who's come through it.
Yes, exactly.
Dignity. But the African is like that, isn't there? There's a dignity there, even in the worst situation.
In all of humanity.
You think so? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
That's reassuring. Yeah, absolutely. There is a dignity there. So
I have a basic, deep belief in the goodness of humanity.
I hope you're right. I think you're right.
There is. Even the people who we see as being the bad guys in Sierra Leone. Actually, to get back to an earlier question of yours, how do you get through to the bad guys? I think was the way you put it. I met a lot of people who'd been child soldiers in the various different militias.
Yes, yeah.
And we had half a dozen of them sitting around a table. Went round and they were all talking about the one particular rebel group, the RUF as it was called. Mm-hmm. And I knew that the guy at the end was RUF. Mm. Mm. And everything they were saying, as each person, they were at this stage, they were 18, 19, but they'd been 12 years old or so at the time when they'd been brought into the military or had been attacked or had seen their parents being killed. Mm-hmm. And finally it was this guy's turn to talk.
The RUF guy.
Yes. And he spoke about how he had been forced to kill his mother.
Forced to kill his mother.
And that was how he was recruited into the RUF.
I thought these tales were apocryphal. I didn't think they were...
Absolutely not.
Children forced to kill their mothers.
You're made to do something like that in front of the village so you can never go back to your village again.
Dreadful.
And you suddenly realise, you see things from the other person's point of view too. There is no... At times I struggle to even see, is there such a thing as a bad person? I'm not convinced there is. I think people may do bad things.
Yes.
Really bad, evil things. But the person at the heart of it, generally they have their own story to tell. And once you get into that, you go, right, now I see. But we need to get to that and find out what it is.
Finish me off on a high note, because that's what Christian Aid is about. The optimism of the rising sun, not the depths of the murkiness of awful events.
Yes. I think overall, I just love the fact that more and more children are going to school. More and more children are living beyond their 5th birthday. We set out, the UN set out the Millennium Development Goals to be reached by 2015, next year. Some of them may not be met, but you know, a lot are being met. We're really getting there. The world's getting to be a much better place.
Thank God for it.
Thanks.
That's Adrian Horsman of Christian Aid in Northern Ireland. On the island of Ireland, you're responsible for disseminating the message all across the island.
Yeah, we're an all-Ireland
organisation. An all-Ireland group. There you are. Thanks, Adrian. Go well. Take care.
Thank you.
Coming very shortly, I've got a lady from Nepal and the Reverend Kingsley Sutton talking with me. That's momentarily after the music, which Andrew will now play.